Welcome to the newest episode of Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. I'm your host, Jason Fraley, picking the brains of the top filmmakers, musicians, and artists of our time. Classic rock band Blue Oyster Cult brings more cowbell to Hollywood Casino at Charlestown Races in West Virginia on Saturday night. I spoke to co-founder Eric Bloom about the band's biggest hits, from Don't Fear the Reaper to Godzilla to Burnin' For You, and of course the hilarious SNL sketch with Will Ferrell's cowbell. Eric Bloom, hey, thanks so much for joining us on WTOP.
Always glad to be rocking with you guys.
We're talking because Blue Oyster Cult, the legendary band, is coming to Hollywood Casino at Charlestown Races in West Virginia on November 19th. What do we got? I assume it's all the greatest hits we're going to hear. Is there any new material, that you guys are gonna roll out, or what we got?
Well, in 2020, we put out a new album, so we will be playing some of the tracks from that album. So it's our newest stuff, and of course mixed in with all the greatest hits, shall we say?
All right, and that's the symbol.
And some deep tracks.
The Symbol Remains is that new that was the pandemic release, we'll call it, and then all the old hits, of course. Awesome.
Yes.
Sounds great. Well, we can dive into a couple of them in a second, but whenever I have someone legendary on, I always love to hear sort of your backstory. I know you were born in Brooklyn, but grew up in Queens. How did you actually meet the guys to form, was it Stony Brook University, something like that in late 60s?
Well, our manager, our original mentor and manager, Sandy Perlman, he was the student body president at Stony Brook. And he went into a place and he heard sort of like a house where people were jamming. And he heard some guys jamming one night, and he said, you guys are really good, and, I have some connections, and you guys could be a band. But it was just some guys basically just jamming together. And that was the genesis of what became Blue Oyster Cult, and that was about 1967. So it's a very long time ago, and a lot of different people came in and out of that conglomerate of that night.
Yeah.
And that's what became Blue Oyster Cult. And that night was Don Roser, who is the key guy, became Buck Dharma. And that's eventually that moved on to many other people who came in and out. But that's today it's Don and I. I joined a couple of years later. And then Albert Bouchard, Joe Bouchard, myself, and Alan Lanier, and that was the original five guys.
Right. Awesome. Well, yeah, and I know it was originally, I guess the band name was something like, it was like Soft White Underbelly, and you changed it.
Yeah, the original name was Soft White Underbelly, which came from Sandy Perlman. He was he was the crux of getting the band off the ground, and he got that name from Winston Churchill, who called Italy the soft white underbelly of Europe during World War II.
Well, there you go. Yeah,
and history played a lot of. Sandy was a big WW2 buff and history buff, and a lot of his lyrics came from history.
I love that. So wait, but where did the name Blue Oyster Cult come from? What is that? What's the meaning?
Well, Sandy wrote this huge poetical opus called Imaginos. And it had a lot to do with sort of science fiction and fantasy. And one of the lyrics of the Imaginos epic was called Blue Oyster Cult, and that existed in 1967-68. Mm-hmm. And when we needed a name to play in front of Clive Davis from Columbia Records, we had to sort of ditch the Soft White Underbelly name, or a couple of interim names we had. And we could not agree, being five individuals, and we gave Sandy we can't agree, you pick a name. So he picked Blue Oyster Cult from his poetry, and that was one of the stanzas of poetry in the Imaginos epic.
A stanza of poetry, and it becomes the name, and it sticks, and it becomes the name of the first album too in 72. Songs like Cities on Flame with rock and roll, but it really was, I guess it was the fifth album that you really became a household name, Agents of Fortune, in 76, because that had Don't Fear the Reaper. Man, just
right.
an iconic.
As you say, that was the fifth album. A lot of people think that was our first album, but we'd been around for quite a while already.
Exactly. Yeah, man. I wanted to give you credit. That was that. You'd already had 4 albums in the can at that point. But yeah, number 5 was where he really blew up. Tell me about putting together "Don't Fear the Reaper." I mean, the theme, that's such like a quintessential rock and roll theme, that death is inevitable and we should just, go ahead and live and love while we can, kind of a thing. 40,000 men and women every day dying, I guess. But was that sort of what you guys were going for? Just sort of what's sort of the message behind the song? Death is inevitable.
Well, obviously, Buck Dahmer wrote that song. You'd really have to be interviewing him about, his personal choices of the lyrics. But
What does it
the
mean to you
I
over the years?
well, we do it every night, and we are happy to be playing a song that was so popular, and it is on classic radio everywhere, all over the country, almost every day, and sometimes more than once a day. So it has stood the test of time, and of course, the famous SNL cowbell sketch, which is rated number one sketch of all time on Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, I'm sure you were watching SNL back in those days. The early casts and everything. Belushi and everybody had no idea that one of your songs would become, legendary. Do you remember where you were when you first saw that Will Ferrell and Christopher
I
Walken?
absolutely do. It's very rare to be off on Saturday night when you do what we do, but I was at home and I was watching it live when it happened.
Oh, cool.
And I was sitting on the couch, and all of a sudden, there you are, being sent up by the SNL people. And my jaw dropped more than I thought it was funny at the time. And all of a sudden, my phone started ringing and saying, "Ah, are you watching this?" So it was pretty funny. And Will Ferrell wrote that sketch, and he had presented it to the SNL producers more than once, and they didn't think it was funny, but now here it is. It stood the test of time, and I think it's so much ad libbing was going on in there that made it funny because you can see they're all cracking up.
Oh, Jimmy Fallon is the worst at keeping it together. He's just busting it. But that makes it so much funnier in the background. But
Yeah,
Will
I think
Ferrell
it's
goes,
Chris Walken. I think Chris Walken is the one who's like making up some lines, and I think he's killing those guys.
yeah, I got a fever, and the only prescription is Morgava. Have you ever,
Well,
run into Farrell or Walken or Fallon or any of them
I
afterwards?
wish we had. I wish we had. Once when we were in LA once to plan a show, we had invited Will Ferrell to come down and come on stage with us, but he was out of town.
Ah, man. Well, keep throwing it out there whenever you know you're in the same place as him, because he'll have to take you up on it at some time. He owes you guys big time for that. Maybe you should write a song
I
called More Cowbell. Invite him to come on a song or something.
You never can tell what might happen.
You never can tell, but it is an iconic song. Well, I know the next album really quick. I need to talk about Godzilla. Oh, there goes Tokyo. Godzilla. Were you? I know you mentioned big sci-fi fans and stuff earlier in the interview, but was that what it was? You just big fans of the movie Godzilla, or what caused
I'd
it?
say that's exactly correct. I mean, we used to back in our early days when we, Don and I grew up in the New York City area, and when we were kids, they used to have, monster matinees on Saturday afternoons, and every town had a local ghoul who would play. Some guy would dress up as Dracula and have a monster movie thing at midnight or something. And in New York, there was a guy named Zachary who had his own monster 11:30 TV show called Shock Theater on ABC in New York, and he would play monster movies and Dracula and Wolfman and Godzilla, and we loved that stuff as kids. So we would often talk about Godzilla and Rodan and Mothra, and so
King Kong.
Don wrote that. He wrote that heavy lick of that, and then all of a sudden it came to him that Godzilla would be perfect as a character for that music.
Oh, absolutely. And just like Don't Fear the Reaper showed up later in pop culture on SNL, the Godzilla song just showed up again in, what was it, Godzilla King of the Monsters, I think, in 2019. That latest one of the blockbusters when they remade it. I think I heard a
Right. Well,
cover of it, right?
they could have used it earlier, but no.
Yeah, why didn't they? They
But
brought in Jimmy Page and Puff
well,
Daddy instead of bringing up
yeah,
your guy.
we have nothing to do with it. But just a little aside, when our song came out, the movie people got in touch with us saying, you owe us.
That you do. I mean, they should be
Yep.
paying royalties forever, I think. But it's a great song. Well, maybe time for one more. I know we're tight on time, but my listeners will kill me if we don't talk about "Burning for You" off of that 10th album, Fire of Unknown Origin in '81. It was written by Roser and I guess the rock critic Richard Meltzer. Is that right?
That's correct. Richard went to Stony Brook with Perlman and donates lyrics from time to time, and just sent in the lyric, and Don got a hold of it and wrote the great song "Burning for You," which was a hit in 1981.
I love, in addition to the lyrics that they were, I love just sort of that. I always think of it as like a circular guitar riff. It's like it hits you hard, and then it's like it kind of loops around in your mind, I guess, a little bit. But do you know how that circular guitar riff sort of came up, or the idea to just hit you right in the face right at the beginning of the song?
Well, again, that's a Buck Dharma song, and
Yeah.
and he we were very lucky that came out at the beginning of MTV, and that was a constant rotation song for the early years of MTV.
Oh, everyone watching MTV could sing, "Burn Out the Day, Burn Out the Night." It was on all the time, but now we're not in the MTV was huge, but now we've sort of come on into the, what do you call it, the streaming and the Spotify and the Pandora age, and but people can still find your stuff, and it's played on classic rock all the time nowadays. When you add up the whole legacy and everything, I mean, do you think what's it going to take to get you guys in like the Rock Hall? I know you probably don't give a crap about that, but what's it going to take, man?
We have no say about the Rock Hall of Fame. That's strictly up to their board. But maybe it'll be posthumous.
Well, don't fear the Reaper, because that means you'll be posthumously Hall of Famers. Maybe, who knows?
I don't know. That's not for us to say. But if Judas Priest can make it, maybe there'll be time for us.
Exactly. It sort of opens the door for other ones. All right. Well, we've hit the big hits, but if our listeners are coming out to the Hollywood Casino to see you guys, what is there like a I don't know, what's like an underrated gem or a deep cut that you've always loved that you might be able to slip in the set for them?
Well, we just did 3 nights in New York about a month ago, where we played our first album, second album, and third album in their entirety.
Oh, just in order? Wow.
In order, the first night, the first album, the second night, third, et cetera.
Yeah.
And then we did 2-hour sets after each one of those of deep tracks. So all those 3 nights were sold out, and people flew in from all over people came in from Australia and stuff like that for these shows. So we wound up dredging up a few songs that we hardly ever have played before, and one of which is Cagey Cretins, which is a song that we never played before. And it was kind of fun. Last night we played it in Bangor, Maine, and the lyric in the song is "It's so lonely in the state of Maine." So it was kind of fun to play that in Maine, and actually be able to sing that to a Maine audience.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They probably all knew it.
It's a Richard Meltzer lyric. It's a song that we never played before, maybe 2 months ago.
Wow.
In 50 years.
That's cool. So, 50 years, break it back out. It was on ice for a long time, but that's really cool.
Yeah, exactly true.
Do you find that the audiences for these shows, is it like, obviously like people that grew up with the music, and then now they're bringing their kids, different generations? Do you find multiple generations out in the audience?
I'd say that's also correct. People, 50 years, a lot of stuff goes on at 50 years.
Yeah, maybe grandkids at this point coming to listen to some BOC. You never know.
I know that's absolutely true.
We have some 3-generational photos there at your shows, but awesome. Well, it's an incredible run, and I really appreciate you joining us. Again, everyone, it's Blue Oyster Cult coming to the Hollywood Casino, Charlestown, West Virginia, November 19th. Mr. Eric Bloom, thanks so much. I really, really appreciate your time.
All right, thanks, and we'll see everybody out there rocking in West Virginia.
All right, give us some more cowbell. We'll be there.
Bye-bye.
Later. Thanks so much for listening to Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. Our theme music is Scott Buckley's Clarion. Remember to give us a 5-star rating if you like what you hear. We'll see you next time.
Explain your DNA on 10 cases, man.
You're inside the police interrogation room with the alleged Potomac River rapist.
I'm not guilty on any of this stuff.
So calm, so reasonable. Could this be the man who terrorized women for 9 years before murdering a brilliant scientist 2 decades ago? Experience one of the most fascinating true crime podcasts available. Join crime reporter Paul Wagner for Unknown Subject, Season 3 of WTOP's American Nightmare series. Search American Nightmare Podcast on all podcast platforms.
I wanted to take a second to tell you about an app I really enjoy. Living in the DC area is great, and Podcast DC gathers all of the local shows that I like all in one local app. Health, sports, local news, politics, and so much more. Podcast DC is the new local app with hundreds of DC area podcasts to choose from. I can earn exciting rewards just for listening and share the podcasts I love instantly. Available in the App Store or in Google Play, listen local with Podcast DC.